Thank you for this nice introduction. I'm very happy to present my work for the first time. So as you said, I'm now almost finishing my master degree. I'm almost done writing the dissertation. And I spent 1 year researching producing safer nights. So I did the 1 year of explorative and critical ethnography. It started in nightlife venues, and later it developed into this experimentation that I will mention a little bit by the end of my presentation. So I would like to walk you through my exploration, present some of my findings and my theory, and I would love to get a little bit of feedback if you have some. So this research started as an ethnographic study of Lisbon's nightlife venues. I wanted to research the role of gender-based violence in the work experience of women and gender non-conforming people. I picked this topic because as a student, I worked many years as a waitress and bartender in bars and restaurants. And as a worker, I experienced many forms of violence during these jobs. So I wanted to, this was kind of the starting point of the dissertation for me. I wanted to explore the impact violence can have in the workers' relationship to their workspaces, to their practices, and how they produce their safety while working in the nocturnal environment. And I also wanted to theorize it. I wanted to see if the strategies that the workers can develop in their work against violence can be understood as a claim for a right to the night. So for this, I collected qualitative data through participant observation, autoethnography, and I also led semester interviews with participants working in diverse venues in center of Lisbon. Here is what I found. Not surprising at all, I found that the workers were exposed to a continuum of intertwined violence during their nightlife jobs. Namely harassment, objectification, physical, sexual violence, also double standard, intimidation. The list is very long, and these violence were also racism and queerphobia was added to these many violence. This made me confirm that Lisbon, as other cities, was a city where the nightlife venues were spaces marked by patriarchal, heteronormative, and heteronormative atmospheres. But what I found looking more closely at the violence is a distinction between the types of violence experienced by the workers depending on the neighborhoods that we're working in, and also depending on the type of venues. I found specifically that two neighborhoods were standing out. It's Bairro Alto and Calle Sodré, because with their hyper-festive atmospheres, very high density of venues and touristic crowds, the workers there were experimenting a very wide range of violence, but specifically more spectacular forms of violence, like physical and sexual violence. And they were mentioning these in their interviews as experiences that whereas in the rest of the city, I found mostly what could be called slow violence. So it would be more double standard, intimidation, sexualization or harassment. But the workers tended to minimalize this violence by saying things like, but in Vienna, I'm lucky because nothing happened. And this weird asymmetry between the neighborhoods was also clearly recognized by those who worked in both. For example, I have this quote of this manager that I interviewed. She worked in Calle Sodré first, and then she moved to Santos in like elegant wine bar, whereas before she was working in a very touristic venue in Pink Street. And she says that basically she was more confronted and also physically disrespected in the first place, whereas in the second one, she was more discredited for her knowledge on wine. But despite these variations, I argue that these forms of violence are either slow or fast, are just part of a single complex, a continuum that affects the workers' relationship to their workspace. And a very easy illustration of this is that since the bar is a masculine word, the women and gender non-conforming people working there tend to categorize the bar space regarding their presumed level of safety. So I made, because I cannot take pictures of venues to protect the anonymity of the participants, I made this beautiful sketch to give you an illustration. I found three zones inside the bar with different levels of presumed safety for the workers. Usually outside would be the scariest space because it would be the terrace with public space and the street, and it would be the space where workers feel more threatened. Whereas inside the venue, they would feel already a bit more protected, but they would have to also navigate other threats. And behind the bar, they would feel the most safe because they would feel protected by this physical separation that they have with the customers. And if they had also a room to rest or for the staff or for storage or something like this, they would also say that they feel very safe. This has to just be nuanced because sometimes they would also have a member of the staff itself that could be threatening for them. So then this whole configuration would change. This is very general, of course. And this leads me to my main finding. I found that the workers develop consciously or unconsciously spatial strategies in their workspace to produce their safety. So these are very diverse. I sorted them into categories. I found that they would either avoid violence or try to anticipate it, and then modify their behavior in the space accordingly. Or lastly, they would fight it more directly and be more confrontational and negotiate more boldly. I listed some of the strategies to give you some examples, like going back behind the bar, expelling a client, or picking the right space to work in the venue to be able to look at everything, to read the room. I found a lot of these strategies. All of these show that the workers are using their workspace to their advantage to try to gain, to reestablish some control over this violent culture. And I also found that they made alliances and cared for each other. Usually I found that it would be queer people looking out for queer people, or women looking out for women, like experienced bartenders would look out for the new recruits. And I also found that some workers were playing by gender rules by using also the men working there for protection or to have more authority on the customers. Yeah, so for all these reasons, I find that workers' agency over their workspace can be understood as a materialization of their claim for a right to the night. So I wanted to use the right to the city, this concept from Marxist philosopher Henri Lefebvre, and try to transpose it to the night. From my findings, I found that right to the night could mean very diverse things, but it could be the right to access the nocturnal space, for it to be some encounters, or it would be a space where minorities need to be treated equally, respectfully there, and it would also mean to have enough power and influence over the space to actively participate to produce it. From my findings, I argue that gender violence exists to punish minorities' transgressions of patriarchal order. Their strategies exist as a materialization of their claim for the right to the night. However, it doesn't stop there, unfortunately, because I also found a lot of limits to the claim for the right to the night. Mainly living precariously as a worker, because besides managers, most of my partners completely lack power or influence in their workspace to actually have a say and change the culture. So most of them didn't have prior experience. They were for a very short period of time in the venue. They were earning They were also subjected to other kinds of worse and worse. Spontaneously in the interviews telling me how working in the night mental health because it isolated them from the daytime world. I had all of the issues making them restricted and limited. Also their capacity to reclaim the night as a worker. So in this context of precarity, my study revealed that the workers find themselves negotiating between and the need to stay employed, which leads them to, which results in discrete agency in the workspace or just quitting the workspace. And in the they do materialize the right to the night. So that use change the sexist and for me this conclusion was very disappointing. Was lucky on my free time creating a techno collective with my group of friends, and we decided to experiment with it. We started in abandoned locations. Our were not as safe or as inclusive as we wanted them to be, and to take action and redirect. So we took some initiative by, for example, making only Flint Alaina, wrote policies, and we made this a code of on how we wanted the ravers to behave in the parties. We wanted the community to follow these rules altogether. Team experiment, and the goal was for assist ravers assistance at a Ravers Corner, so to raise awareness on gender-based violence, and this led us to write protocols a lot in the party and also on social media. This is an example of a code of conduct that we wrote, and this is an example of the Ravers Corner that we had in the last party. This experiment is very new, so I cannot say a lot about this for now, but I would say that the outcome is pretty positive because we get some good feedback from the ravers. They usually say that the parties are well organized and safe, so it's very nice to hear. We really wanted to have this community-based approach, but of course no one had experience in this work. So we were learning with trial and error, and even if we understood some things like how to place the Ravers Corner in the right spot of the party to be visible, accessible, but also in a calm space, or how to diffuse tension, de-escalate conflicts, and many things like this. We also noticed that since we started, we had a lot of difficulties because we already mentioned this at some point of the conference, but being this visible also puts the volunteers themselves in danger because we become ideal targets because of this visibility. And also we had some issues writing policies in this context of free party because as a free party collective, we cannot really, for example, expel someone or ask someone to not be shirtless. We have many examples of debates like this. So we are also trying to just provide guidelines and not be as restrictive, but it's an ongoing debate that I find very interesting. Yeah, I wanted to conclude this presentation with this experimentation because I think that it can be my initial fieldwork because I think that even if fields are very different because the agency and managing to fight violence in whereas in the second one, there's way more freedom and active participation. Better the right to the straight rise. I think there are also some similar strategies. So now we'd love to explore a little bit more the second field and go deeper in the right to the night.
Perfect, thank you. I'm really excited to present and also really sad that I can't join live, but things are the way they are. This is a side project and I'm very excited about feedback. I wish to turn it into paper at the end that I'll publish, and please do let me know if there is any issues with the sound. I'm not sure my internet is very stable here. Nightlife, even when designed for the LGBTQ+ community, is a generally unsafe experience for many, especially multiply marginalized members of the community. Over the last few years, a type of initiative has emerged internationally to try and provide support to queer nightlife goers at parties, festivals, and raves, awareness teams, we've heard about them many times, sometimes called body systems, or in German, Awareness-Arbeit, which stands for awareness labor. In this paper, I argue that these interventions form an intersection between care and activism that promotes social change by acting on its localized setting, the clubbing experience. Awareness labor plays a dual role as a stopgap and a bridge. Can you see? Not actually sure, maybe. So, as a stopgap, awareness labor prevents the most vulnerable members of the LGBTQ+ community from falling through the cracks of nightlife. And as a bridge, this kind of activist labor aims to bring us to, as a society, to a place where we know how to care for ourselves and each other. My argument for this paper is based on a grounded theory using qualitative expert interviews. I focus on the city of Graz in Austria. Although it is the second largest city in Austria, with a population of around 280,000 inhabitants, it is still tiny compared to, say, Vienna, which is 2.5 hours to the north. Let's just say it's big enough to have a queer scene, but not big enough for society to be cool about it. I myself have lived in Graz for 10 years, which means that I have a very good overview of the different parties and clubs and their efforts over time to make nightlife safer for queer people. In this paper, I introduced two experts, Sarah Kampic and Stefanie Gmeiner. They are both in their early 30s and have been involved in the subject of my research for years. Stefanie is one of the heads of the awareness team of the Factory, with a G, a queer sex-positive party that takes place once a month in the biggest club in Graz. Sarah is one of the co-founders of the NGO AVA Graz, which in German stands for Awareness Labor Graz, an organization that provides awareness teams for clubbing and other events. I should reveal at this point that I know both of them personally, since I have been intensively involved in queer feminist activism in Graz over the last year. I have been to the Factory many times in the past. I worked with AVA at parties organized by my activist collectives and organized an awareness workshop with Sarah for my activist NGOs. Being part of the scene helped me get in touch with Sarah and Stefanie, and it also helped me to understand the essential work that their teams do in a small provincial town where my hypervisibility as a trans non-binary person is constantly met with hostility. In this paper, I will first focus on the goals of awareness labor and the tools it uses to achieve these goals. I will then consider the revolution and subjectivity that this form of labor requires and produces, both in those who do the labor and in the world around them. And finally, I will argue that their action is a form of utopian labor. The aim of awareness teams is to create a safer space at parties. It is common knowledge at this point that it is not possible to guarantee a safe space because, as Sarah said, I quote, "You don't know who's going to be in the space," end of quote. Awareness teams cannot promise that everyone will feel comfortable, that there will be no violence, no discrimination. So they aim to give people who have experienced violence and discrimination the support and care they need. The team members are there in case something happens, either to work with security staff to prevent further escalation or to give the person space to talk about what has happened in a non-judgmental environment. The help that the person receives must be determined by them alone, with the awareness team supporting them in the way they decide. Awareness teams operate in a specific context, usually a club. They have to meet a number of requirements in order to achieve their goal of creating a safer space. First, they need to design an awareness concept that is specific to the space they are working in. It must include at least an isolated cool-down space where people who have experienced violence or discrimination can withdraw and relax, and a location or a stand in the club where guests can always find someone from the awareness team. Looks like that. This stand must be visible and its location clearly communicated to guests. Awareness team members will also move around the room wearing distinctive outfits or accessories such as fairy lights and neon t-shirts. Looks like that. That signal their role to guests. The awareness concept will also include a code of conduct, we've heard about that, which will be displayed on posters throughout the club and on the stand, stating that oppressive behavior and violence is not okay and reminding guests of the basics of consent. The stand will also provide stickers, condoms, and other educational material, for example, on discrimination, safer sex, or safer drug practices. The awareness concept includes an entrance talk where team members provide guests with information on how to use the space, where to find the stand, or how to identify team members. They also remind guests of the code of conduct and screen people based on their behavior at the door, trying to assess whether those entering the space are potentially harmful or not. For an awareness concept to be successful, the team needs to educate everyone who is involved in any way with the event. This includes bar staff, security, DJs or band members or artists, the technicians, and the organizers. The awareness team organizes a meeting with everyone before the event starts so that everyone knows there is an awareness concept and what it involves. All the people involved are potentially going to experience discrimination and violence themselves, or may be involved in perpetrating it. The meeting allows the awareness team to make everyone aware of the concept and to ensure that they are committed to the code of conduct, but only performatively. Ideally, the collaboration between all the people involved will build an awareness structure at the level of the whole event. If anyone notices anything out of the ordinary, they will know how to act and support those who are affected. Of course, the awareness structure requires the awareness team to have authority over who can stay and who has to leave the space, enforced by security. The concept is useless if the team kicks someone out and the organizer pulls them back in. This is the very first function of awareness labor, to ensure that members of oppressed groups who often experience violence or exclusion from nightlife can experience it by providing a safety net in case something happens. Awareness teams are placeholders. They stand in for missing social structures or general knowledge about oppression that would prevent gendered, sexual, or racial violence in the first place. And as far as I'm concerned, that's already great, but it's not all awareness labor does. Awareness labor, to borrow Iris Young's phrase, aims to bring a revolution in subjectivity. This revolution has to start with us, as it did for my two experts. Stephanie is a social worker. Sarah co-founded an NGO to combat catcalling and street harassment. Both felt a strong call to action to help others and stand up for them. Awareness labor is for both a form of political activism and a form of empowerment. This revolution of subjectivity begins then with within those who do awareness labor. They need to learn about oppression, domination, discrimination, intersectionality, privilege, and barriers. Therefore, they need to embrace a state of constant learning, both as an individual and also as a team. Awareness team members need to learn to care for themselves, to know their own limits and capacities. They need to be open and patient with those who approach them at events while they are stationed at the stand, even if their interlocutors are privileged, drunk, high, or annoying. They learn to respond to everyone without prejudice, to remain calm in challenging situations and to de-escalate them, and to give everyone a real chance to learn. This requires basic and ongoing training, keeping up with the updates to the awareness concept and being responsible. That is sober. A key skill that awareness team members need to learn is to allow others to hold them accountable. Sarah highlights that privilege causes people to contribute to the oppression of others through unconscious behaviors and beliefs. We contribute to oppression mostly unintentionally or unconsciously, so we need to be called out and held accountable. In this sense, awareness needs a violent kickstart. The process is initiated from the outside, from oppressed people telling us about our privilege. We need to acknowledge that we will help people listen to their experience of oppression, question our own assumptions, beliefs, and actions, and apologize sincerely. Those who are professionally involved in awareness labor systematize learning and teaching about oppression, producing educational materials, or running workshops for bar staff and people interested in becoming awareness team members. In this way, awareness labor aims for a trickle-down effect. Awareness experts share their knowledge in the hope of enlightening others, teaching them how to become aware of their surroundings and the ways in which they affect others. In doing so, they act on several levels of society or layers. Awareness labor is relatively new in a small city like Graz, so awareness teams need to educate all members of society who attend their parties, as well as funders, festival or event organizers, and bar staff. Raising awareness at all levels of society will take years of dedicated labor. To sustain such an effort, awareness teams need to be paid and valued by event organizers. It needs to be seen as serious and demanding work that relies on specialization and the mastery of specific social knowledge and skills. Awareness teams aim to teach partygoers specific skills that are not commonly taught to members of Western societies, neither in school nor in culture. Self-reflection, self-awareness, recognizing, expressing, and maintaining our needs, desires, and boundaries, sensitivity, empathy, caring, intentionality, respect that is not necessarily tied to understanding, acceptance, awareness of others in our immediate environment, the ability to put ourselves in other people's shoes and to stand up for ourselves and others, solidarity, and finally, consent and bodily autonomy. These are all values and psychosocial skills that awareness teams aim to bring to society, to teach to society at large, through their interactions with the guests, but also through their own training processes. These skills are absolutely essential if we are to have a society that is not based on exploitation or domination. And in this way, awareness labor helps to create the kind of society we, or at least certainly I, want to live in. It is interesting that this form of awareness raising targets such a specific setting, but the club is a repetitive and controlled environment. It is a closed space, usually similar to other similar spaces where many people from many different social backgrounds gather for a few hours. Furthermore, partygoers may be more receptive to educational opportunities if they are not forced upon them, but take place in their leisure time. Because of the informal setting, guests can experience a space where everyone cares for and loves each other and take that experience and that feeling home with them. And each person who learns something about something moves forward in their own journey towards greater awareness, which is likely to spread and communicate to other areas of that person's life and to society as a whole. Each person, as Sarah described, acts as a multiplier. It is impossible to reach everyone or to make a change in every person reached, but every small change counts, as those who have become aware transfer the skills they have learned in the club setting to their everyday lives. Awareness labor operates on different timelines with different goals in mind. Awareness teams act on society through their passive educational offer. Awareness labor is most likely to reach those who experience violence, that's members of oppressed groups. These people will take up the educational offer while the others are likely to reject it. But according to Sarah, this is already more than enough. Indeed, she explained that perpetrators are more likely to either behave or leave if they move in a crowd that feels more aware. If no one cares or is aware of the mechanisms of oppression, then acts of discrimination and violence are more likely to go unnoticed and unchallenged. Ideally, says Sarah, I quote, "The aim of awareness labor is that it is no longer needed because people are aware enough at the events to look after each other and to look after themselves." End of quote. Everyone takes responsibility for their own well-being and that of others and recognizes that they can act in situations of discrimination and violence. In a way, awareness teams set an example of how to treat each other with respect in a pluralistic and diverse society. They create environments of care that teach us a different way of being with each other. In conclusion, awareness teams fill a gap in the nightlife fabric by providing emergency care to those who need it in the absence of structural solutions to issues of discrimination and oppression. Awareness labor acts as a placeholder, ensuring that a wide range of marginalized people have the opportunity to experience nightlife at all. And at the same time, awareness teams educate all nightlife participants on issues such as consent, gender-based and sexual violence, discrimination and marginalization, safer sex and drug practices, and so on. In doing so, they teach this localized segment of society how to care and act as agents of social change, developing the necessary skills in all demographic groups that come into contact with nightlife. In an ideal world, we would not need awareness labor, but awareness labor is necessary both to work towards that ideal world and to ensure that members of oppressed groups can participate in this aspect of society until that day arrives. Ideally, awareness labor makes itself obsolete, and in this sense, it functions as utopian labor, calling into the here and now a future we would like to already be present. Thank you.